everyone. This is Rabbi Brian Bileci. I am here, Messianic, Jewish, Sicilian rabbi with you today, and I am just so grateful that we can jump into our Hebrew class today, and I'm just grateful that you have joined us. Again, my name is Rabbi Brian Baruch, my Hebrew name, Bileci. My last name is Sicilian, and I'm just so thankful that you have joined us today. And so we are going to jump into a wonderful Hebrew class today and pick up on last week's portion and this coming portion. We are just going through each Torah portion and looking at a little bit of modern Hebrew as well as biblical Hebrew. So as we jump in today and look at our presentation that we have, I got a couple slides I've prepared for you, and we're going to start with our Alef-Bet. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with our 5 letters at a time. The Alef-Bet is really the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, and Alef-Bet obviously starts with Aleph and Bet, and that's the A and the B of Hebrew, which is like saying I'm learning the ABCs, but in Hebrew you just say the A's and the B's, Aleph and Bet, which is where we get the word alphabet. So let's go ahead and start with 5 letters at a time. Take a short breath in between, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next 5. All right, you ready? 1, 2, 3. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Vav, Zain, Chet, Tet, Yud. Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech. Ein, Pe, Tzadi, Kuf, Resh, Shin, Tav. Tov me'od. All right. You want to do that again? Let's do it one more time. We start with the Aleph, and we have either a 1-syllable or 2-syllable name for the letters. If it's 2 syllables, lean on the first syllable, as in Gimel versus Gimel, or Dalet instead of saying Dalet. So Aleph, 1 syllable, Hey, 1 syllable, but where there's 2 syllables, lean on the first syllable for the accent. Okay, we're ready? 1, 2, 3. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Vav, Zain, Chet, Tet, Yud. Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech. Ein, Pe, Tzadi, Kuf, Resh. Last 2, Shin, Tav. All right. That includes the 22 consonant letters, which we've learned before that half of them can be used as a prefix. The 22 letters also have a nikud vocalization that goes along with it. The little dots and dashes, the little dotting are pointings that point you to the sound that you should pronounce with each consonant letter. And when you're looking at nikud vocalization, of course, we're going to still have our traditional A, E, I, O, and U vowel, but we're going to sound it as A, E, O, U. A, E, O, U. So that's going to be the sound of our vowels. So let's go ahead and take a look. Let's see if we can take a look at these sounds, and we're going to go ahead and start with the A vowel, and that would be pronounced A, A. So the A vowel is pronounced A. And then we have long, medium, and short. Long, medium, and short. And so when we're looking at the vowel, we actually look at it underneath the letter. So the letter we'll be using for structure is Aleph. Aleph. And that's going to be the letter that is silent, like the 16th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Ein. They're both silent and can take multiple vowels. In fact, Aleph happens to be one of the 5 vowel indicators along with the letter Ein, and also including Hey, Vav, and Yud, which can take on multiple sounds, you see, based upon the vowel that's either before the letter, like at the end of the word, or directly underneath the letter. So when we read Hebrew, we read 1 letter at a time. And so how we're going to do this is by using a formula, C equaling consonant, V equaling vowel. Add that together. A consonant plus a vowel is 1 open syllable. A consonant, then a vowel, and then an extra closing consonant will close off the syllable so that you can either have open syllables are closed syllables. And, when it comes to open syllables, you might be most familiar with the sound that's open on shalom, because that would give us sha, and then close it off with lom. So notice it starts with sha, the letter sheen, a consonant letter, and the vowel underneath, the little T-looking symbol, is a part of the nikud vocalization. And transliterated, it would be shalom. We also know that we have other words that we use when we bless the Lord. We say Baruch. Well, the Hebrew spelling would be Baruch, which is Ba, the letter Beit, and the kamatz underneath it. And notice the structure after reading from right to left, the Resh, the Vav with the dot on its side, and then the Chaf in the final form, Chaf Sofit, with a shva inside, giving us to a glottal stop. So we pronounce a consonant, a vowel, a consonant. The consonant is the resh in this closed syllable. The vav with the dot on the side goes from a V consonant to a U sound, a U. And then the chaf sofit is CH, and the two dots inside the shva means come to a glottal stop. No extra vowel sound will be pronounced after that. So we have Baruch, Baruch, Baruch. So we say that when we say blessings, Baruch Atah Adonai. So when we say the blessing, we might say a word like this, Melech, Melech, which is also starting with an open syllable in yellow and going on to a closed syllable, in this case, the lamed, underneath the vowel, Tsere, the three dots in a downward triangle, and again the chaf sofit for a glottal stop, lech. So we have melech, melech, melech. And then we'll say melech ha-olam, that he is the king of the universe. Olam, or universe, is olam, olam. So we have a consonant, which is ein, which is silent, and then a vav with a dot now on top, and o. So let's go ahead and go back to our vowels so that we can sound these out and read one consonant at a time with its accompanying vowel. So the first vowel we'll start with is the A-type vowel, pronounced ah. Depending on what is underneath the letter, it will show us it's a long, medium, or short letter. So we have kamatz, kamatz maleh, which is long, patach, which is medium, and chataf patach, which is short. And so we have long, medium, or short. Think of a sound of a shofar, the long sound, the medium sound, and the short staccato blast that you hear when you hear the sounding of a shofar with its many different lengths of sound. So lines that look like a T or a hyphen are usually going to indicate a vowel pronounced ah. Multiple dots are going to remind us of eggs for the S sound, so the E vowel is pronounced eh. So tsere, tsere yud, and sagol yud would be long. Sagol by itself, three dots in a downward triangle, would be medium, and hataf sagol would be short, and even one more form called shva. Shva is reduced, either a short S sound under the first letter, or it can even remind us of a glottal stop. The short S sound is shvanah, and the glottal stop is shvanach, shvanach, the sounding shva or the resting shva. Now, it's easy to do an I vowel because you only have to use the hirik, one dot, and we think of the dot on a lowercase I, and it seems like we've got another friend from India watching, Vikas. Vikas is watching with us. We also have people from India that are on the Zoom with us, and we might get to hear from them later. So Vikas, thank you for saying shalom. We say shalom to you. We say shalom, shalom. And so we're grateful that we have people watching on Facebook. And hirik, yud, is the dot followed by the letter yud, or hirik by itself would then reduce it from long to medium. If we go on to the O vowel, this is the fun one. The vav with the dot on top is the normal way to make an O, cholam vav. And you can shorten it by just removing the vav and leaving the dot floating in the air, or the rare, medium, and short of the kamatz chatuf or chataf kamatz, which again you memorized a few times that the kamatz that normally is an ah sound is an o. You just memorize it, as in the o of not in English versus note, N-O-T-E versus N-O-T. You just memorize when it's an o sound, when it's an ah sound. Most of the time it's going to be o. And then when we move the dot from the side, it goes to an oo sound. How do we remember this? The dot on top of the vav, we say, oh, look at that bird in the air, because the dot is in the air. And then we say, ooh, look at that nice purse. Ladies always notice a nice purse. So the ladies remember this ooh sound quite often because the dot's on the side, like a purse on a woman's side. And the guys always like to think of, oh, look at that bird in the air, that plane in the air. It could even be Superman in the air. So here we have the 5 sounds. Let's go ahead and sound it through. 1, 2, 3. A, E, O, U. Again, A, E, O, U. One last time. A, E, O, U. Tov meod. Very good. Now, to go into the look of the consonant letters, we have to keep in mind that some letters change their form at the end of a word. The kaf with a dot inside looks like a backward C. If you remove the dot, it's chaf, and then we have chaf sofit, the final form in yellow. Mem has a final form also, mem sofit. Nun will follow the pattern of chaf, where there's an elongated line, so nun and nun sofit. Pe will also have an elongated line that goes from horizontal to vertical, and that is pe, or fe, without the dagesh in the center. And then we have fe sofit. Again, the bottom horizontal line just kind of plants itself in the ground below the writing line of the letters. And then sadi does the same. Sadi and sadi sofit. Sadi, sadi. It's a very noisy S. It's usually transliterated TZ or TS. You don't really pronounce the T. You start putting your lips together like you're going to pronounce a T, but then you go into a noisy S sound. It's the sound of mitzvah and the sound of, in English, putting on mitts onto your hands, gloves on your hands when they're cold. So we know that the structure of the letters are pictographs. I want to show you a couple of them when we rehearse the name Avraham, who was originally Avram. So Abraham in the Bible is really Avram. So these names actually are compounds. We have exalted father, who became a father of a multitude. If I just look at the first 2 letters, it's Av, father. If I actually add an aleph, it becomes the Aramaic form of Av, father, with a dagesh in the letter beit. It becomes Abba. Instead of Av, A-V, it becomes Abba, A-B-B-A, which could mean daddy, father, papi, my father, my daddy. That's really what it means. So we take the first letter aleph, which is an ox head of strength, and then we add the letter beit, which is the house or family, ancient pictographs of an ox head coupled with a house. And this ox head, which is the head of the house, is the father. So who is the strength of the family? It is the father. So you can see how these pictures continue to give us deep meanings of the words. You can't always break a word down into every single letter to make it a pictographical kind of definition. Sometimes words just form and grow and develop over time. But, you can see how Gimel is really the origin of camel. The G sound in the Semitic tongue became a K sound to make camel, and this is the picture of the Gimel. Now, the form that you see it on the left is the modern form. On the right is more the ancient Paleo-Hebrew form. Dalet is a door, which was more of a triangular tint of a tent door. The letter He was a window. which could also refer to looking through the window or beholding something through a window. It could even mean a window of revelation, behold, as in hineni. He, hine, and hineni, all from the same letter. So we see vav, which we use as a prefix for and, but it's a picture of a hook that hooks two things together, boys and girls. And then we have zayin, which is a sword or a weapon. Chet, which is a fence. Interesting because chata is sin. So you can imagine going beyond the fence, or that which causes separation is sin. And we have tet, which is a snake or anything coiled, even like a basket. The letter yud, which is the picture of a hand, kind of an open hand, versus the kaf, which is a closed hand. And don't forget, it has a final form. Then the lamed is an ox goad or a teaching tool, points you in the direction you should go. Mem is like maim, water, and it has a final form. Nun is a fish or means to reproduce like fish, and it has a final form. Samech, a prop, or that which supports you, like somech noflim. God, somech noflim, supports the fallen. And ein, which refer to a physical eye, or the eye of the earth, which is a fountain of water, giving off water just like an eye gives water when it cries. Or a mouth, which speaks of an opening, letter pe. Tzadi, a fish hook, often called the righteous, because of the word sadiq, which means righteous. So sadi and sadiq spelled almost exactly the same, except for the letter kuf, which is going to give us the last sound of sadiq. And then kuf by itself is the back of the head, sometimes even defined as a monkey. Reish is kind of like the front or top of the head, which is kind of why it's considered to be first, as in reshit, or as in the actual Hebrew word, which is rosh, as Rosh Chodesh, the head of renewal of the moon, or Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. And we know that Rosh could be even the person that's the head of the yeshiva, a place of learning in Jerusalem, to learn Hebrew, to study Torah, to study the Talmud and the Mishnah. The letter Shin is a picture of teeth, but speaks of the function of eating, and even eating like fire, which not only eats but consumes. And finally, the letter Tav, which is a picture of a cross or a mark. When we look at the Hebrew, we can even see that in ancient Greek, there was an equivalent letter that the Greeks drew from, so that the Aleph was the origin of the Alpha, and Beit, Beta, or modern Greek would be Vita, like the Beit without the dot, or the Dagesh, which changes from a B sound to a V sound, from Abraham to Avraham. The Gimel, you can see, is like Gamma, and Dalet like Delta, and He, or which if you drop the H sound, the S sound, Epsilon, or Epsilon in modern Greek. Or there was even a letter like Vav, which is now obsolete in Greek, but spelled almost the same. And it can go down the line, Zayin like Zeta, Chet, and Tet like you have Theta, Yota, you have Yod and Yota, or modern Hebrew would say Yud, but some believe it could have even been Yod. And the letter Kaf, you got Kappa, Lamed, Lambda, Mem, Mu, Nun, Nu. You can go on down the line and see there is a equivalent letter for each corresponding Greek letter, but there were some letters added. So that is the reason why we have Omega as the last letter, because those letters were added. They were added because you can even see a letter like Tav or Tau, and then the Upsilon, Phi, Xi, or Chi, Xi, Omega are all added. So important to understand that when you see the comparison, you hear that there's a similarity between Aleph and Alpha, it's true. Or Beit and Beta, or Vita, Vet and Vita, or Dalet and Delta, or Gimel and Gamma, or He and Epsilon, or even the letter that is obsolete now in Greek, that is like vav, vowel or wow, and it goes from the V sound or W sound to more of a F sound, vowel. So in German, you would see that Volkswagen, it's really the Volks's wagon. So the V is pronounced as an F, Volkswagen. And the W is pronounced as a V. Two different letters, but you can see the change in German. So if we were to do a little bit of vocabulary, if we want to refer to me as the teacher, you can call me Rabbi, but there is an official word for teacher, more. More is teacher. And shalom is peace, but it's also used for hello and goodbye and saying, how are you? We would say, ma shlomcha for a man, and ma shlomech for a woman. For instance, Hamore Omer Shalom El Talmidim. So, Hamore Omer Shalom El Talmidim, which means the teacher says Shalom to the students. So, Ha-Omer is the teacher. Ha-More is the teacher. Omer is to say. Shalom is the way to say hello. El means to. And Ha-Talmidim means the students. And we know that we could actually take it back to the singular form, Talmid. So Yeshua would have had 12 Talmidim. Each one would be a Talmid, a male student, or a disciple, we should say. Talmidim, plural, would be male students or disciples, plural. But to make it female, let's go back to Talmid for a minute. We add the A sound for Talmidah. So notice the suffix, Talmidim, Talmidah, or all females, Talmidot. So with a masculine noun like Talmid, to make it plural, we add the im or im sound at the end, Hirik, Yud, and Mem Sofit, Talmidim. For a feminine form, singular, we would actually say Talmidah. So we start with Talmid and add the A sound, Talmidah. Instead of Talmid, Talmidah. But when it's feminine, to go plural, we say Talmidot. So notice the difference between Talmidim, where it's male students. It could even be male and female, but there is at least one male present. And Talmidot, if there's only female students or disciples. Now, let's imagine that these Talmidim or Talmidot are in a room. That would be cheder. So let's say I go to a name like Dan. As we look at some milim, vocabulary words. Dan. So Dan is pronounced Dan, as Daniel or Daniel. And we could say, with a prefix in front of cheder, the letter beit. So if we take the prefix of the letter as a letter here, the letter beit, which is a picture of a house, we see the dagesh is in the house. So what we do is we actually use that to refer to being inside the house. And so the idea of the letter beit being a house and the dagesh is like, inside the house. Again, Vika says thank you. We see that it's important to understand how these prefixes work, because the prefix in front of the word cheder was going to change it from room to in the room. So we talked about how we have prefixes that attach to a word, and we have 11 of them out of 22. Alef-Bet, Hey, Vav, Yud, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Shin, and Tav can be used as a prefix. If I add the letter beit in front of a word, beit, I would only take the sound of the letter be and add it to the front of the word. It would mean in, or ba would mean in the, as in a prefix from the word bite, or the construct form bait. Sounds just like the letter bait, right? So house is bite, and the letter bait looks like a bite. How do you say house? Bite. Not bayit, bite. Bite. Sounds like a bite of food. So, when we see that this bite is used as a picture of a house to refer to that which is in the house, you can see how that is coupled with the word cheder, and now we can say with the name Dan, we can add that and say Dan bacheder. Dan bacheder. What does that mean? Dan is in the room. Dan is in the room. Now we could change and then say another word for room, specifically a classroom. And this is kita. Kita. Classroom is kita. So any room generically is cheder. But specifically, classroom is kita. So I could say Dan bakita. Dan bakita. That Dan is in the classroom. Dan is in the classroom. Remember, we learned the word more is teacher. So what if we have the teacher talk to Dan? So hamore, the teacher, omer, which means to say, el, which means to, Dan, which is Dan. The teacher says to Dan. Wouldn't you like to know what the teacher said? The teacher says this. Dan. Ma, which is what. Ata, which is you. Ro'eh, which is to see. Ba, which is in. And cheder, which is room. Dan, ma'ata ro'eh ba'cheder. Dan, ma'ata ro'eh ba'cheder. Dan, what do you see in the room? Again, Dan. Ma'ata, what do you? Ro'eh, see. Ba'cheder. Ba'cheder. Notice the chutzpah on cheder. Make sure you pronounce that first by pronouncing ba by itself, ba, and then go into the sound cheder for the letter chet. Chet. Don't cough up a lung when you do that, but ba cheder. Not cheddar. We're not saying cheese. Cheddar. It's cheder. Cheder. So Dan, ma'ata ro'eh ba'cheder. Dan, what do you see in the room? What does Dan see? So here we go with the pronoun ani. Ani. Ani means I. So ani, so he responds, ani ro'eh. Ro'eh means to see. This is different from ro'eh or ro'i, which means a shepherd, which is spelled not with an aleph, but the letter ein. This word, ro'eh, coming from ra'ah, resh, aleph, hey, means to see. To see. So ani ro'eh, it's masculine present tense to see. Ani ro'eh, I see. Ani ro'eh more v'talmidim. Ani ro'eh more v'talmidim. Now we learned what more is. More means a male teacher. A male teacher. So what is he saying to the male teacher? He is responding to the male teacher that ani ro'eh more. I see a teacher. Now the definite article is not there, which would be the letter hey in front, because remember we learned about prefixes, that you can have prefixes in front of the word. We haven't really done a formal lesson on this prefix, which is a definite article. We'll do that maybe next week. But the prefix here is the, which is the letter hey. So when you look at the letter hey in front of more, which is teacher, we found out ha more is the teacher. Ha more. So the teacher asks him, what do you see? And he responds, ani ro'eh more. Ani ro'eh more. What does he see? I see a teacher. Now we have the letter Vav, which is a prefix that we found out the letter Vav can be a picture of a hook in Paleo Hebrew, but it is used to hook words together in a conjunction, which is the English word and. So when you use the Vav with the front or prefix to the front of a word, you're saying and. And. So what does he see? He doesn't just see a teacher. Oh, sorry, the English doesn't give you the proper. I didn't change the English there. It says Ani ro'eh moreh v'talmidim omer dan. So, it does say it, but I just didn't spell it right. I see a teach. It should say I see a teacher and students. So he said v'talmidim, which we found out talmidim were male students. Male students. So we have the response tov, which is the word good. Tov. Tov. So tov is good. Tov is good. Now it's interesting. We'll actually talk about that in just a minute because I do have something I want to get to share with you from the last Torah portion and this week's Torah portion. So the word for good is tov. Tov. Tov is good. We use it all the time when we say that we want to have a good year. A good year. We say in the feminine form, tov becomes tova, and we say year, shana. Shana tova. Good year. Some of you know that the Jewish New Year really is around the fall, Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, but for some, they like using Shana Tova for even the secular calendar that we're in a new year, 2021. But technically, Israelis would not do that because they would only refer to the one in September, sometimes as late as October, to be the one that would be the proper time to say Shana Tova. Shana Tova. Have a good year. So, if we're looking at this concept of tov, which means good, you can see that when the teacher responds, tov, omer hamore, good, says the teacher, he's responding to the fact that, good job. I asked you what you saw. You said you saw the teacher. You saw me, and you saw the students there. So that was the comment that he responded back with, tov. So then we have luach. Luach. We could add that and add the word for words. Now, you know we've been looking at the milim, like you could look at Sarah, the name Sarah, but milim is words from a vocabulary list, but milon would actually be the word for words. Now, not the same as devar and devarim, because those are words, talks, discourses, or things. But milon or milah is actually referring to an individual word in a vocabulary list. It is a little different from devar, which means to literally have a talk. So milon, words, al haluach, words are on the board. So luach is board. Luach is board. Now, let's see if we can look at last week's Torah portion. We have Bereshit, or Genesis 47:28, and it says, Now Jacob lived, Vayechi, in the land of Egypt for 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. So if we look at the name of the Torah portion, it was Vayechi, Vayechi, and he lived. And this is from the root chaya, chaya, chet, yud, he, chaya, which means to live, or remain alive, or sustain life. And you'll be more familiar with this word chai, which is the noun, life, life. Now, in Hebrew, each letter is a number. So Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3, Dalet is 4, He is 5, Vav is 6, Zayin is 7, Chet is 8, and Tet is 9. So if I were to look at two letters here, though we said Chai is spelled with Chet And the letter Yud, of course, the kamatz is the vowel underneath, but the letter Chet and Yud are two letters. Chet is the number 8, and Yud is actually the number 10. On the next line, we would go double digit, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. So Yud would be 10, just like Sadi, under the 9 in the second row, would be 90. Just like if I go down another line, we have the letter Kuf, Resh, Shin, Tav, and then the 5 final letters of Chaf Sofit, Mem Sofit, Nun Sofit, Fe Sofit, and Sadi Sofit to be 100 through 900. And 1,000 would go back to number 1, Aleph, and in a text you would just enlarge the letter Aleph to show it's 1,000. So this is how Hebrew letters are written out, the kind of alphanumerics. So we have like Roman numerals that are letters and numbers. So it is originally with Hebrew. So we have the letter Chet, which is 8, and we have the letter Yud, which is 10. So let's go ahead and put those two numbers together. The numerical value of Chai, life, is 18. It's interesting. Sometimes we think people have come of age at the age of 18 in America. I know it's different in other countries, but at 18, we'd consider that person ready to live their own life. And I don't know if that's an influence from Judaism or not, but it's interesting that that's there. So we look at this portion, Vayechi, and then we go back based upon the statement that says he lived 17 years in Joseph's house. Jacob lived 17 years before his death, dying at 147 in Joseph's house. But if we go back 10 chapters, that's the same number of years that Joseph, as a young man, lived in Jacob's house before they were separated, and Jacob thought his son was dead, with the goat's blood on his beautiful striped or colored garment, coat of many colors, as many call it, that taught the father, Jacob, that possibly his son was dead, or that's what he believed, even though his heart probably knew he must be alive, kept some glimmer of hope alive. So we talked about the good year, Shana Tova. Well, did you happen to know that we can also take the word good and do a numerical value for it? So we're going to look back at this structure, and we're going to see that the letter Tet, which here is number 9, coupled with the Vav, which is 6, and the letter Beit, which is 2, and we can now do the math of 9, 6, and 2, which is 17. Could it be that the 17 years that Jacob lived his final years of life in Joseph's home was to remind him that God was restoring back the 17 years of the age of his son, his 11th son, Joseph? It would remind him of those 17 years he thought he lost, so that God said, I'm going to restore the good years back to you. I'm going to give you back the 17. I'm going to give you this numerical value, 17, in the word Tov. You want the good years? Those are the first 17 years of Joseph in Jacob's house, and the last 17 years of Jacob now in Joseph's house in Egypt. Guess what? If you put those two 17s together, 17 is 17, it would equal 34. So the first 17 years were good, and then the last 17 years were good. And it's interesting, this portion also equals 34. Vayechi, and he lived. Well, he lived when Joseph was alive, and then he thought he was dead, and he lived again, if you will, when he found out Joseph was really alive. Therefore, this portion shows the two 17-year spans joined back together because father and son were back together. What a powerful revelation on that. Now let's jump ahead to Shemot. Shemot is found in Exodus 1:1. So the reason we call this book Shemot, the book of Exodus, and the portion that is first read in it, Shemot, is because look at the first verse of the book. Now these are the names, or in Hebrew, these are the Shemot of Bnei Israel, which means the sons of Israel. Bnei Yisrael. B'nai is plural for ben. B'nai is the construct form, meaning sons of. So B'nai Yisrael, sons of Israel, who came into Egypt with Jacob, each man with his family. So the word Shemot, the name of the book and the name of the first portion of the book, is names. Because the singular form versus the plural, Shemot, is Shem. Shem, name. Very similar to Shmuel, which is Samuel, but can be translated either name of God, if it comes only from the root Shem, or it could even be connected to the word Shema, which means to hear. The Shem and the Mem plus an Ein, and we have possibly heard of God. Because, again, we have this idea, or literally we could say heard from God. So Samuel could be connected to that, or like when we say Hashem, the name, you could clearly just mean the name of God. So talking about Hashem, which we use for the Tetragrammaton, the name of the Lord, Hashem Adonai, Yud He Vav He, written from right to left, it's based upon the statement where when Moses asked, "What name shall I say has sent me?" speaking first to the Israelites and then later to Pharaoh, God responds in the first person, Eyeh Asher Eyeh, which is translated, I am that I am, but is more properly interpreted, I will become that I will become, or I will become who I will become. So if you look at this, we're talking about a verb root that means was, because Adonai is the God who always was. But it's translated in the future because he will become or manifest to what you need him to be. So this statement, Eyeh Asher Eyeh, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I am that I am is really I will become that I will become. And is very similar to the statements in Exodus 33:19. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. Now going back to the word Shem, the actual root connects to the word Sum, or another form would be Sim, like the famous Sim Shalom. We see a primitive root here in the Strong's Concordance, obviously, not that it's primitive, but it's ancient. And it means literally to appoint or call a name or impute or lay down or make out, mark. It doesn't really mean these things. It's actually translated this way in the King James Bible. So this is a list of all the ways the King James Bible has translated this root sum or sim. The idea is to put in place, to appoint. So you put someone's name or you appoint someone into an office, it is this root sim. It's actually what we say in the priestly benediction when we talk about the fact that God will establish peace for us. He will establish peace for us. So interesting that I'll even close out today with the priestly blessing where it says, Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, may Adonai bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yunecha, which means may Adonai make his face shine upon you and show you favor. And then Yisa Adonai panav elecha ve'yasem lecha shalom. Look at that. Ve'yasem, sem. Yasem means that he will appoint or place or give you. So in this case, it's translated and give you peace, but literally it means to place peace for you or establish peace for you, because the idea is where we get this root here. That means that the placement of, say for instance, someone's name, seeks to name out, to place, to purpose, to mark out, to put, to ordain, to establish. So he will place peace on you, or he will pronounce peace on you, or he will regard peace over you, or he will establish peace for you. He will appoint peace for you. That's what the blessing is saying. When he speaks something into existence, it's appointed, it's placed into position. It's the same root the idea of placing someone in an office. So to determine, to fix, to make, all of these ways we translate this in Old English from the King James Bible. But now, if we go a little further, we can actually look at another form of the word of Shem, and we could take the word Sham, which means there. And many of you know that when we play with the dreidels at Hanukkah, we have a tendency to find ways to have fun during the festival. We play with the dreidels, and one of the letters is a Shin, which Nes Gadol Haya Sham. Sham means there. A great miracle happened there. So as we spin the dreidels and eat our latkes, and eat them possibly with applesauce and sour cream, I actually just rather do the sour cream, or even maybe a little ketchup always sounds fun to me. When we do that, we're actually talking about this miracle that happened there. And this miracle that happened there, of course, if you're in Israel, you change the letter from Shin to Pei for Nes Gadol Haya Po. A great miracle happened here instead of there. It's also where we get the word neshama. Neshama. So the idea that God places or appoints someone there, we have neshama. But there is a spirit in man, and the inspiration of the Almighty gives them understanding. So God literally appoints or inspires us with this idea of breathing us into existence, establishing us by his breath. Nesham means to breathe, but the root sham actually means to place you there. So how did God place Adam in the garden? He breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. There is a spirit in man. The inspiration of the Almighty gives us understanding. And it means that a name often embodies the essence or character or destiny of a person. So neshama is the inspiration of their purpose in the world. It goes back to Nishmat Chayim. Then Adonai Elohim formed the man out of the dust of the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath or inspiration of life. We can literally say the inspiration of both our soul and our spirit, because at that point that the spiritual breath was entered into him, man became a living soul. So both spirit and soul were inspired that very day. So that wraps up all of my thoughts for today. Now, I actually want to see if we can go for a second, if we can go to, we can go to Blue Letter Bible, and I know some of you on Zoom might even have some questions, so feel free to unmute if you have questions as I kind of go through this. Not sure if is Joseph with us or not. I'm not quite sure. I know we have about 5 on Zoom with us. Hey, Joseph, good seeing you. So we have, I don't know if you saw that my friend Vikas had said shalom, and also said thank you, Rabbi. So he's watching from India also, and so we're learning to work a little smoother with this program. But I have it set up to look at Exodus here, so you can see that well. Great. Okay, so now what I want to show you is here Shemot. Shemot. So looking at Shemot, and it says, now these are the names. So here it is in Hebrew. Ve'ele Shemot b'nei Yisrael haba'im mitzrayma et Yaakov ish uveto ba'u. So ve'ele, it doesn't even have it in the list here, but ve'ele means and these. Ve is and ele is here, these. So we have ve'ele, and then we have Shemot. So interesting here that we have ve'ele, Shemot, these are the names of who? Bnei Yisrael. And if you look right under here, you see Ben. But it's in the construct form Bnei. So very important to see that. And then we have Yisrael. Yisrael. So we have B'nai Yisrael. Notice Israel is Yisrael. It starts with the letter Yud, Yisrael. And then we have the imperative bo. Now, if you go back to the text, though, you see that it says haba'im. Haba'im. Well, you know what's so interesting about that is we say Brochim haba'im. Blessed are those who have come. When you say welcome to a group of people, instead of saying Baruch haba, like we say Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, that welcomes one person. But we actually say Bruchim haba'im for welcoming the coming of multiple people. Well, here we have haba'im, which means the ones coming. So who are the ones coming? The sons of Israel. Where were they coming? Towards Egypt. Here's Mitzrayim, but in the form Mitzrayma. So instead of having the mem sofit as the final letter there, we have the kamatz underneath the mem and a hey added, and that ah sound means towards Egypt. So Egypt word, or Egypt bound. They were bound towards Egypt. They were going towards Egypt. So Mitzrayma. We do the same thing with beit for house or bait for house, and we say habaita, homeward bound. So Mitzrayma means home, Egypt bound. They were going towards Egypt. And then we have the word for man, which is not Adam in this case. It's really more like the male. The man meaning opposite of the female. Ish. Remember, Ish Sadiq is a righteous man. We'll hear Ish. So literally it's translated every man or each man. And sometimes in the text we'll see Ish. And if they say Ish twice, it just means not just one man, but every man. So we see Ish. So let's go back here. Ish, and it says U veto. Now, that's an interesting one. Let's take a look at that for a minute. We have the letter here, beit, and then the yud, and then the tav. And remember, we learned about house, which is bait. They add an extra H there because phonetically some Jews pronounce the H, but the Israelis and the ancient Hebrews probably did not have an H sound. It was just bite. So drop the H in the phonetics there and just say bite. Not bayit, but bite. So we have this word bite, which means house. We have a vav in front that means and because normally the dagesh would be in the letter beit for bite, the dagesh is stolen away by the vav to change the sound from a V to a U sound. So it's instead of vebeit, which sounds weird, they say uveit. The dagesh removes out of the letter beit, reduces it from a B to a V, and uveto. What's the O at the end? The vav with the dot on top, the O, means his, as a suffix, his. So we have uveto means each man his house or his household. And then again they have the word here, bo. But in the text, it's actually a little deeper. It doesn't say bo, it says ba'u. So to come is ba. But if you say imperatively, come now, bo. So ba is coming. Like Abba ba, the father's coming. Ima ba, the mother's coming. But ba'u means that it's referring to the u sound is they. So they're coming. So basically what you have here is, as it says in English, each man in his household came with Jacob. They came with Jacob. Now, interesting. The with is not there in Hebrew, but the Aleph Tav is used to sometimes mean with. So we have 8, which is Usually not transliterated. I mean, not translated at all or transliterated. But in this case, it means that it is that it means with. So with Jacob, each man, his house, came. So that's how that works. You guys have any questions? Had a nice full class today. We covered a lot of stuff. Yes, and I have to be brief today because I didn't want to go more than an hour, but yeah, kind of keep a brief question about it. Yeah, yes, yes. Okay, let me actually go. Let me scroll down. Yeah. So we have Benjamin, right? So you're saying the order. You're saying as far as the order goes. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at right here. So you have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, which we know are four sons of Leah. Okay, so then what we have is Issachar and Zebulun, and strangely enough, instead of saving him for the end, you have Benjamin mentioned, right? Okay, so you have to silence me while I'm talking because it's coming through. Okay, there we go. So you have the list, and remember, every time you list the 12 tribes of Israel or the 12 sons, it changes the order all the time. It's almost like the disciples. The disciples get listed in different orders at times. But in this case, yes, it does seem to be strange that you have Rachel's youngest son mentioned here. And as far as Issachar and Zebulun, for instance, let's go ahead and click here the tool for that. And let's go into, for instance, Zebulun. So Zebulun is Zebulun. And you have here Genesis chapter 20. And here we have the statement that it says, and Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. So they went for Zebulun. Okay, and then you have here, and afterward she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. So you have Zebulun, and then we had, what was the other son we had before Benjamin? Okay, good to have you with us. Good to have you with us, Azariah. Shalom, shalom. Okay, so if you have Zebulun here, and then notice that after bearing, we have, then Jacob remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. Okay, so then, of course, you have Joseph, and then, of course, later you're going to have Benjamin, right? So it's interesting, though, that Joseph has died, and they're all now in Egypt, and the Pharaoh does not remember Joseph. And so it's strange that, let's see if we can go back there. If we go back here, we see Issachar and Zebulun, and then you have Benjamin. The question is, where's Joseph? We'll look at over here. It says Joseph's obviously dead. And so he says, all those who were descendants of Jacob were 70 persons, for Joseph was in Egypt already. So actually, I shouldn't say dead yet, but they're talking about when they first came in, Joseph was in Egypt. So you have the 11, and Joseph is not mentioned, but right after Zebulun, it says Rachel had Joseph. Well, he doesn't put Joseph, he puts Benjamin instead, because basically when Joseph was seemingly dead, who takes the next role? Benjamin. Does that make sense? So you have to unmute yourself there, Joseph. Yeah, it makes sense. It's almost like it's sentimental. It's emotional. It's like the sons of Leah for Judah, I mean for Jacob. But then all of a sudden you get into Joseph, but you can't mention Joseph because he's already in Egypt, and at this, as they're coming into Egypt, he thinks he's dead. So who does Moses list almost as a kind of a memory? Well, at least he had Benjamin, and then he goes into the other children and mentions that Joseph was already there, and then in verse 6, and Joseph died and all his brothers. So it's almost just that way to respect the dad and say, yes, we know Joseph you thought was dead, and then he eventually died. So let's remember Benjamin, because he's still alive coming into Egypt and still playing a role as one of the heads of the tribes. Good question. All right, guys, I want to close out tonight because I promised my wife we would keep it an hour. And I hope that you have really enjoyed this teaching tonight. So actually at this time, do you mind if I go ahead and do the Aharonic benediction? All right, well, we're going to go ahead and jump in. All right, so stretch your hands for the blessing. We already went through this Hebrew blessing. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ye'er Adonai panav elecha v'nihiuneka, Yisa Adonai v'lecha v'asem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you, be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you perfect peace in Sar Shalom, the Prince of Peace. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah, B'Shem Yeshua, Amen. God bless all of you today. I'm so grateful that you have joined us. Can't wait to see you next week. Jump on Zoom at 6 o'clock, 6:30 live p.m. Pacific Standard Time. God bless you all.